Do you think the Middle Ages were an era of noble knights, swooning ladies, and universal piety? Are you serious? You need to throw that picture out of your head right now because it's a total myth. While you're imagining monks copying Bibles, real medieval people were engaging in sexual practices that would make a modern BDSM party look like a children's birthday party. Get ready, because we're about to take a journey into the most perverted, bizarre, and shocking corners of the medieval bedroom. And no, these centuries weren't dark because of a lack of electricity. They were dark because of what people were doing under the cover of that very darkness. Let's start with one of the wildest courtship rituals in human history: sleeping together. Imagine you're a young man and your parents have found you a bride. Great! How about a date? Nope. Instead, you're put in the same bed with a complete stranger. This custom, widespread in some parts of Europe, was a sort of parental control version 1.0. The young couple would be tucked into bed, fully clothed, and a massive board, the so-called chastity board, was often placed between them. Because of course, a piece of wood is the best way to stop hormones from raging. And here's the most insane part. This wasn't some secret teenage rebellion. This custom was encouraged by parents. The bride's family would invite grooms to test for compatibility by spending a night in the same bed with their daughter. It's like modern parents saying, "Sure, you can stay the night, we'll just tie you to opposite corners of the bed." The absurdity of the situation is just off the charts. This practice was so common that it spawned a whole body of folklore, and even special wide shirts for shared sleep that made any physical contact difficult. And as you might guess, this system worked terribly.
What a twist!
Chronicles and church records are full of complaints about unexpected pregnancies that happened after these safe sleepovers. It turns out that if you put two young people in a bed all night, a board between them isn't always an insurmountable obstacle. Who would have thought? Priests loudly condemned the practice as leading to sin, but they couldn't do anything about it. The tradition was too strong. It was the medieval equivalent of trying to ban teenagers from using the internet. Formally condemned, but happening everywhere in practice. The phrase, "the way to a man's heart is through his stomach," was taken way too literally in the Middle Ages, and that path didn't lead to the heart, but a bit lower. We're not talking about strawberries and champagne, we're talking about a menu crafted to ignite carnal passion, with ingredients that would make you call the health department today. The main delicacy at this feast of love was animal gonads. The testicles of young bulls, boars, and rams were especially prized. Medieval cookbooks are filled with recipes for dishes made from stones, as they were delicately called. They were roasted, boiled, stewed, and even ground into a powder to be mixed into wine. But that was just the beginning. The menu of arousing foods included sparrow brains, which were believed to increase male virility. Dishes made from a sow's womb were served, based on the belief that eating a symbol of fertility would make you fertile yourself. It was a kind of sympathetic magic, just with a lot more awful. The spice trade thrived, not just for flavor. Cloves, ginger, and nutmeg were considered powerful aphrodisiacs, which explains why they cost a fortune. People paid in gold for what was essentially medieval edible Viagra. Wealthy aristocrats held entire feasts of love, where absolutely every dish, from appetizer to dessert, was designed to boost libido. And you know what's the craziest part? These feasts were often held at weddings. Imagine you show up to a wedding and you're served 7 courses of genitals and brains to help the newlyweds on their first night. The wedding cake was often made with almonds, pistachios, and honey, not because they were delicious, but because all these ingredients were considered stimulants. Medieval doctors wrote entire treatises on arousing cuisine, with detailed recipes and instructions. Manuscripts with titles like "On Foods That Multiply Seed" or "On Dishes That Lead to Lust" have survived. And these weren't underground pamphlets, they were serious medical texts. The obsession with aphrodisiacs was so intense that some foods were forbidden during fasts, not because of their calories, but because they were considered too sexually arousing for people focused on spiritual matters. Think meeting your partner's parents is awkward? How about having sex on your wedding night in front of a crowd of relatives and friends? Welcome to the medieval bedding ceremony, where the concept of private space wasn't just forgotten, it was legally abolished for aristocratic marriages. The logic behind this madness was, in a very medieval way, straightforward. A marriage was considered valid only after its consummation, and since marital union secured the transfer of lands, titles, and fortunes, witnesses were needed to confirm that the deal was done. After all, nothing solidifies a legal contract like a group viewing of a sexual act. The procedure was meticulously planned and humiliating. After the wedding feast, the bride and groom were led in a solemn procession to the bedroom. There, the bride's bridesmaids would undress her, and the groom's friends would do the same for him. Then, the main show began.
Let's get ready to rumble!
The couple was tucked into bed, and witnesses, the most distinguished guests, clergy, and family members gathered around. And they didn't just peek in for a second, they stayed for the entire duration, sometimes encouraging the newlyweds with advice and jokes. But wait, there's more! In some cases, after the act, witnesses would carefully inspect the sheets for traces of blood, which served as proof of the bride's virginity and the fact of penetration. Imagine having to present your bed linens to a panel of judges as evidence in a case. Because technically, that's what it was. And the most astonishing thing is that this wasn't just for kings. Any marriage tied to major assets could require witness consummation. Some couples tried to cheat, asking witnesses to wait outside, but that didn't always work. Judicial archives contain cases of marriages being annulled because consummation wasn't properly witnessed. This meant the couple had to go through the whole thing again, but this time under strict supervision. The practice was so normalized that there were special etiquette guides prescribing how both the couple and the witnesses should behave, where to stand, what to say, and how long to watch. Medieval society turned voyeurism into an official social institution. The medieval aristocracy didn't just have sex. They planned it like a military campaign, with the help of astrologers and confessors. We're talking about a time when getting pregnant required more planning than launching a shuttle. The medieval obsession with the right time for conception was based on a wild mix of astrology, humoral medicine, and church dogma, which resulted in the most complex schedule for producing offspring in history. Couples consulted astrological charts to determine the best planetary alignment, because obviously the stars cared deeply about their sex lives. According to medical texts, the best time for conception was a waxing moon, when a woman was in a hot and moist humor balance. Some treatises advised waiting for certain saints' days, believing that children conceived on those days would get special talents. Just imagine, you'd have to check 3 different calendars to figure out if you could try to have a baby today. But the matter didn't end with choosing the day. Doctors gave detailed instructions on the time of day, usually midnight, the weather, warm and moist, and even which direction the bed should face. Sex became a logistical nightmare, and the methods for choosing a baby's gender were beyond belief. To conceive a boy, the husband was instructed to tie off his left testicle during the act. Yes, you read that correctly. It was believed that boys came from the right testicle and girls from the left. The level of anatomical ignorance required for such a belief is astonishing. Church prohibitions complicated things even more. Sex was forbidden on Sundays, Wednesdays, and Fridays, during Lent, Advent, during menstruation, pregnancy, breastfeeding, and for about half of the year's days. couples had to navigate a minefield of religious restrictions. Wealthy families hired special consultants, a hybrid of a doctor, astrologer, and priest, who created personalized conception schedules. The pressure to produce an heir in accordance with these complex calendars was so great that some couples were willing to travel hundreds of miles to be in the right place at their optimal window for conception. In the Middle Ages, underwear wasn't just a matter of hygiene, it was a magical artifact. We're talking about a time when whether you had children or not could depend on your undergarments. The Venus belt wasn't just a pretty name, it was a real belt, made of silk or linen worn at the waist or hips. Prayers, astrological symbols, and magical spells were inscribed on it. It was believed that these belts increased fertility, ensured easy childbirth, and even improved sexual abilities. But the belts were just the tip of the iceberg. Women wore amulets containing everything from powdered unicorn horn, actually narwhal tusk, to crushed gemstones. All of this was supposed to boost their reproductive functions. The strangest accessory was the conception stone, a small crystal that a woman was supposed to hold in her underwear during sex. It was believed that different stones gave different results: emeralds for boys, sapphires for girls, and diamonds for twins. Medieval people thought they could control genetics with jewelry. Men weren't far behind. They had their own fertility accessories, special rings, amulets with animal parts, usually testicles of course, and even consecrated loincloths to increase potency. The church was an active participant in this business. Priests would bless fertility belts, amulets, and even marital sheets for a fee. Sex life had become a sort of religious subscription. Some of these accessories were so complex that they came with instructions. Texts have survived that explain exactly how to wear the belt, what prayers to recite, and what to do if it stopped working. It was the medieval equivalent of technical support for magical lingerie. The most expensive items were made of imported silk, gold threads, and precious stones, which made them a luxury item. The poor had to make do with homemade versions, creating a class system based on the quality of your enchanted underwear. Do you think modern divorces are humiliating? Now, imagine having to prove your sexual competence or incompetence in front of a commission of judges, doctors, and just curious onlookers. Welcome to the medieval impotence trial, a place where the right to privacy died a painful death. Since the church made divorce virtually impossible, accusing a husband of impotence was one of the few legal ways for a woman to dissolve a marriage. But this required not just a word, but a full-scale legal investigation into your bedroom life. The process was surreal. First, doctors would examine the couple for any physical genital anomalies. Then they would be questioned under oath about the frequency of their attempts and all the intimate details. But the real nightmare was the Judicial Congress. Yes, that's the official term. If the medical examination didn't yield results, the court could order the couple to have sex under observation. Special rooms were set aside for this, where experts and court officials would watch the process through peepholes or from behind a screen. The couple was given a certain amount of time. If the man couldn't achieve an erection, the marriage was annulled. Some men tried to cheat the system by using various stimulants. Court records contain cases of men being caught trying to sneak aphrodisiacs into the trial room, which led to even more humiliating searches. But the most insane part is that these trials could drag on for years, requiring dozens of observed attempts. The judges, it seems, thought they needed to give the man enough chances. Another popular defense was to blame witchcraft. A man could claim his impotence was the result of a curse, and then the trial would turn into a witch hunt. Women who filed the lawsuit also faced humiliation. They had to prove that they were attractive and passionate enough to arouse their husbands. It was assumed that the woman herself could be to blame for the man's impotence. The social consequences of such trials were catastrophic. Regardless of the verdict, all participants became the subject of gossip and ridicule for the rest of their lives. Here's a fact that will blow your mind. The medieval church didn't just turn a blind eye to prostitution. It was Europe's largest pimp. The very institution that preached purity and abstinence was making a huge profit from the oldest profession. For example, in the 12th century London, the Southwark area had 18 licensed brothels. And who owned the land they stood on? The Bishop of Winchester. The clergy claimed that prostitution was a necessary evil, a kind of societal sewage system that diverted lust away from respectable women and prevented more serious sins like rape or sodomy. So they decided to regulate this business and profit from it. The business model was brilliant in its hypocrisy. Officially, the church couldn't approve of prostitution, but nothing in canon law prevented it from collecting taxes and rent from the brothel owners. These brothels operated under strict rules established by the church. Prostitutes had to wear special clothing, work specific hours, and were not allowed to appear in respectable society. They were forbidden from working on church holidays or refusing clients without a good reason. The financial scheme was simple and ruthless. Prostitutes paid the brothel owners, who then rented the land from the church. It was a pyramid with bishops at the top. And the most insane thing? The income from prostitution went to pious causes, building cathedrals, supporting monasteries, and organizing religious processions. People were paying for their salvation with money earned from sin. The system was so entrenched that when reformers tried to shut down the church-owned brothels, they met with furious resistance. Too many influential people were profiting from the business. The empire of ecclesiastical prostitution lasted for several centuries and only collapsed with the coming of the Reformation, when this hypocrisy became too obvious to ignore. Medieval birth control methods were so strange, dangerous, and ineffective that modern birth control pills look like alien technology in comparison. Let's start with a classic: animal testicles. Women wore amulets around their necks with dried weasel testicles. The logic was that weasels are very sexually active but have few offspring, so their organs must pass on the property of controlled fertility. But that was just the beginning. The arsenal included potions to drink, from powdered castoreum mixed with wine to iron filings dissolved in water, and even mercury. Yes, that poisonous metal. Some women literally poisoned themselves trying to avoid pregnancy, which technically worked, since the dead don't give birth. The most ridiculous method was sneezing. It was believed that if a woman sneezed hard right after sex, the force of the contractions would expel the male semen. So women would carry snuff or pepper to induce sneezing at the right moment. Physical barriers were no less crazy. Women inserted wool tampons soaked in honey into their vaginas. Or even worse, crocodile dung, believing it would kill sperm. Some used half a lemon as a kind of diaphragm, which thanks to the acid might have had some effect, but was extremely uncomfortable. The rhythm method was based on a completely incorrect understanding of the female cycle. Doctors believed that women were most fertile during menstruation, not in the middle of their cycle. Thus, couples trying to prevent pregnancy were having sex at the most dangerous time, practically guaranteeing themselves a pregnancy. The withdrawal method, of course, existed, but doctors warned that it caused terrible diseases in men, from blindness to madness and a quick death. So even the only relatively working method was discredited by the authority of medieval medicine. Medieval people were obsessed with sex. They created a world where the church managed brothels, and a divorce required a public demonstration of intercourse. Their approach to sex reveals a fundamental truth about humanity. In desperation or ignorance, we are willing to believe in anything and try anything, whether it's eating brains for potency or wearing enchanted underwear to conceive.